including the Bidens, undermining a key pillar of the president's impeachment defense, that the two circumstances are unrelated. A source with direct knowledge of the manuscript tells CNN the New York Times telling of Bolton's account of the Ukraine aid hold discussion with Trump is accurate. President Trump denying Bolton's claims, tweeting, "If John Bolton said this, it was only to sell a book."
I don't know if we left on the best of terms. I would say probably not, and so you don't like people testifying when they didn't leave on good terms.
The Times says the book also details conversations Bolton says he had with key cabinet members, including Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Attorney General Bill Barr.
I think Ambassador Bolton is an important witness to hear from directly. There's a lot of missing blanks here that would be helpful if we could have the direct testimony in order to complete the record.
In a joint statement, the House impeachment managers urging the Republican senators to vote to allow new documents and witnesses, writing, "There is no defensible reason to wait until this book is published, when the information he has to offer is critical to the most important decision senators must now make, whether to convict the president of impeachable offenses." Before the Times report, Republican leaders were confident that they would defeat the vote this week. But now it is less certain, according to 3 GOP sources.
I don't know how my Republican colleagues cannot call for witnesses. Senator Romney has called for witnesses. They should all be calling for witnesses. We have to get to the truth.
Now, Bolton's attorney in a statement says that they are not responsible, Bolton or his team, for this leak, that they went through the proper channels of actually submitting this draft manuscript to the National Security Council in case there was classified information, although they say that this manuscript does not have classified information. They believe that someone outside that approved group to vet this manuscript may have leaked this, and they are calling to question whether or not it was somebody inside the White House. Allison.
Suzanne, thank you very much. Let's bring in Elie Honig, CNN legal analyst and former federal prosecutor, and CNN political commentator Joe Lockhart. He was President Clinton's press secretary during that impeachment. Mystery solved. We don't have to wait for the book to be published. The New York Times got their hands on this draft, and we now know what was suspected, and that was that John Bolton does have answers to these things. He did see it with his own eyes. He did see the president tie directly the aid to Ukraine to doing a political favor for President Trump. Here is how the New York Times characterizes it. In his August 2019 discussion with Mr. Bolton, the president appeared focused on the theories Mr. Giuliani had shared with him, replying to Mr. Bolton's question that he preferred sending no assistance to Ukraine until officials had turned over all materials that they had about the Russia investigation that related to Mr. Biden and supporters of Mrs. Clinton in Ukraine. What changes today, Elie?
Wow. To me, that changes everything. I mean, we have gotten used to a steady drumbeat of new revelations coming out for the last 4 or 5 months about the Ukraine scandal. But I think it's important people understand this is on a whole different level. This is right down the middle. This is the heart of the matter. This is direct testimony about a direct conversation with Donald Trump. There's no secondhand, no indirect, no speculation. And it goes right to tying the aid directly to the investigation. So the Republicans have raised the bar, raised the bar, raised the bar. They can't raise it any higher. And now it's been cleared. And boy, there better be witnesses. I can't even comprehend. And Joe will tell me in his political wisdom that even with this, there will be no witnesses. But I can't comprehend there not being a witness now. John Bolton not testifying now.
This is exactly what the president's defenders say the case lacks, right? This is precisely an eyewitness. There's no eyewitness who says the president tied the aid directly to the investigations. Well, now there is. And it's not only the president's political defenders, it's his legal defenders. His lawyers got up in front of the United States Senate and said this on Saturday.
There is simply no evidence anywhere that President Trump ever linked security assistance to any investigations.
Now there is, Joe. So answer Ellie's question. Is it more or less likely, or how does this affect those 4 Republican senators as they decide whether to vote for witnesses?
Well, it's obviously more likely that there'll be witnesses, but that's only because as of Sunday afternoon, there was no chance there were going to be witnesses. I think, Republicans was clearly signaling it all day Sunday that they had won this fight and they were willing to swallow the whatever bad press they'd get. I still don't know that it makes it extremely likely. Remember, the president's defense, you say at the heart of the president's defense. The president's defense has changed a dozen times. This is just the most recent one. And it does go to the heart of whether there's firsthand information. But I think most Republicans, and probably the four that we've been concentrating on, have made up their mind that they just want this over, and they're willing to take a short-term hit. We'll see. I mean, we're going to see from the White House defense today, whether they now bury this defense. We're going to see it in the hallways. We'll get.
Well, their defense is that Bolton can't be trusted. You're already hearing that in the president's tweet.
Well, I think you may see a subtle change from the senators, which is something along the lines of, listen, we've known from the beginning that the president acted improperly, but you don't remove a president for a phone call. I mean, it's specious on its face, but their arguments from the very beginning have been specious.
The president is saying he tweeted it didn't happen. Yeah. So that's exactly why you need a witness. Yeah. That's what cross-examination is for. If it didn't happen, his lawyer should be eager to get Bolton on the stand to prove it.
By the way, the president's not under oath in that tweet. Okay, and consider his truthfulness on this up until this point.
Very much.
Consider the other evidence that we've seen in the impeachment investigation until this point. All the people who say the president didn't say it to them directly, but they have all kinds of signs and evidence.
And they were operating under those instructions. Yes. I mean, the people who testified, obviously, in the House investigation believed that they were under instructions to get this out of Ukraine. Now we know who heard the first initial instruction.
Can I just say one more thing? And I think it's important. John Bolton, who did apparently write this in a book, could also come out in the next hour if he wanted to and say this out loud.
Can he?
Yeah, he can. He can. Sure. Now, what he can't do is testify. I mean, here's how executive privilege comes into play. Here's where the blockade comes into play. If the Senate votes, we want to hear from John Bolton, then Donald Trump, he's already said, I'm going to invoke executive privilege. Now we have a legal contest, and that could go either way. I do not think executive privilege applies here. It does not apply as a general shield against wrongdoing. But there's another question of who decides. Republicans are saying it has to go to the courts, which means we're going to be delayed.
But executive privilege doesn't matter if you walk to a microphone today, you're saying.
Right. Executive privilege does not cover that. There's no way he can, as a practical matter, unless he goes to court at 9 a.m. this morning and gets an injunction, which is really hard to do, there's nothing to stop Bolton.
There's no executive privilege police, as we've been saying before. And Charles Savage in the New York Times writes, I think cleverly, that executive privilege has been used as a shield, not a sword, a shield by people. If I am sitting there testifying, saying, I can't tell you anything because the White House is exerting executive privilege, and those people saying that don't want to tell you. But for someone who does want to tell you, it's never been tested.
And a limited shield. There's this notion out there that it's a blanket protection. No, it's supposed to be very limited to military, national security secrets. This is not that.
Okay, well, then the next few hours are going to be very interesting.
And they really are. I do want to make that point because over the next few hours, I expect we could and should hear from